in the sense of this, I consider myself, I started this show back in October. We've probably done over 300 episodes now, really just to start asking the questions that most seemed unwilling to ask. But as a consequence, I've had to suffer all manner of abuse and insults, accusations.
Yes.
I truly believe I have a solid heart and live with integrity, but I've endured all kinds of.
I know what you're talking about. Believe me.
Insults, but I'm far from alone. And even people who question things privately, and I know many of my audience will experience this frustration. I've heard stories from as close people in my team who separated from their loved ones. They've fallen out with family members. They've lost friends, all because they're asking different questions. And even if those questions lead to very profound different answers to what we're seeing in the mainstream media, people are just rationally unwilling to tolerate it. Could you comment on that piece here? Because
yes.
I think for a lot of people on an individual level have lost, fallen out of people, and it's very hard. It magnifies the issue, really.
Yes, indeed. One characteristic of mass formation is that it makes people extremely intolerant for dissonant voices, for other voices. And actually, we can easily understand that if we know that these other voices, these different voices, threaten to wake people up and to confront them again with these problematic conditions before the mass formation existed. So, meaning that if someone tries to convince someone that the corona narrative is wrong, or that the mass narrative is wrong, then the people feels that he is at risk of waking up, and in that case that he will be confronted again with the initial free-floating anxiety and the lack of social bond and stuff. And so that's one of the reasons why people are highly intolerant, that the masses are highly intolerant for dissonant voices. Second one is, of course, that actually it's far more easy for someone who is hypnotized or grasped in the process of mass formation to, instead of believing the one who tries to convince him that the story is wrong, it's far more easy to direct all this free-floating frustration and aggression that existed before the crisis to this dissonant voice. That's exactly what happens. In a mass, people constantly, masses tend to commit atrocities as if they perform a holy duty or something. That's very typical. And at the same, what they actually feel is that by trying to destroy the dissonant voices, we actually protect the collective, and that's true to a certain extent. They don't realize it, but that's why it feels to them as if it's something like a holy duty to a sacred duty to be cruel to dissonant voices, and at the same time they protect the collective, but also they channel all this free-floating frustration and aggression. They concentrate it on one point, and in that way they satisfy a certain need to channel frustration and aggression. But indeed, Gustave Le Bon already described it somewhere in the 19th century that one of the major characteristics of the masses or the crowds is their intolerance for people who do not go along with the masses, and they want everyone to be part of the masses. And at the same time, it's very strange. At the same time, they will usually not really destroy their last enemy because they need enemies. So the masses can only exist if they have an enemy, if they have an object of anxiety. That's something that was very well described by Orwell in 1984, where he talked about the Eurasian warrior who was a constant threat, but nobody actually knew whether he really existed or not. But the masses and the totalitarian system always have to invent new enemies, new objects of anxiety, because if there would be no object of anxiety, the masses would not have a reason to exist, because one of the main reasons is the controlling anxiety. So, and the leaders of the masses feel that if there would be no object of anxiety anymore, the masses would wake up, and what would they do if they wake up? the first thing they would do is kill their leaders. That's something typical, because then when they wake up, they start to realize the losses they suffered while being under hypnosis, and they will blame their leaders for their losses. That's typically what happens. Gustav Le Bon also describes that. He says everybody who puts himself in charge of a mass better prepares to be killed by them.
Well, I would like to hold that thought and come back to that, because I think that's something I'd like to come to towards the next phase of the conversation, because undoubtedly people will think, where are we in the cycle? Because at some point I do think that moment will come where people will suddenly realize all the sacrifices they've made were made in vain, were made needlessly in many ways, and the great loss personally and collectively, to be quite frank, because what I don't understand about the collectivist mindset is that, and I've said, my followers who've been watching this all the way through will hear me say this over and over again: you can't save the entire forest by protecting one tree. We're happy to become collectivist around COVID cases, but simultaneously allow the economy, education, the healthcare system to basically flatline. And I say, what is collectivist about that? Allowing society to collapse. It doesn't feel like a very collective methodology to me. But that again, that's rational thought. But they're not operating rationally. Am I right?
Yes, it's completely irrational, and that's something very strange. So that's exactly. I think that's a consequence of this narrowing of the field of attention.
Yes,
people seem to be aware of only one small part of reality, and the way in which, and as a consequence, all the decisions are made as if only that part of reality counts. So, and all decisions and all measures are really disproportionate. That's something that was so typical for the totalitarian systems as well.